There were a great many men in the army of Kitai, but they were not good soldiers, and they were not well led. Most of them were farmers, sons of farmers, desperately unhappy to be so far from home and fighting in northern lands. They knew millet and wheat, or two-crop rice, vegetable plots, orchard fruits, silk farms, growing and harvesting tea. A number of them worked the salt flats or the salt mines, and for these the army was a better life than the near slavery and early death they'd known and expected. Next to none of them had any idea why they were fighting Kislik barbarians, marching through a yellow wind and blowing sand that stung and cut whenever the wind grew strong. Tents and tent pegs blew away in that wind. The Kislik had horses, and they knew these lands, knew the terrain and the weather, could attack and retreat, kill you and be gone. As far as most of the 200,000 men in the Imperial Pacification Army of the Northwest were concerned, the barbarians could keep this bitter place. But their own sage and illustrious emperor, ruling in Hanjin with the mandate of heaven, had judged the Kislik to be presumptuous and arrogant, needing to be taught a stern lesson. His advisers had seen opportunities here, fame and power, rising within the court hierarchy. For some of them this war was also a test, a preparation for the true enemy, which was the even more presumptuous Xiaolu Empire north of Kitai. There was a treaty with the Xiaolu, had been for 200 years, broken at intervals, never irreparably. By its terms, the steppe people still held the 14 prefectures they had taken below the long wall of Kitai. The glorious emperor's father and grandfather had not been able to win them back, by diplomacy or threat of arms, though they had tried both. Not even an offered princess had sufficed. The Xiaolu knew what they had. By holding those hilly lands with their narrow passes, they ensured that all the northern cities of Kitai were open to horsemen racing down a wide plain. They held what was left of the long wall. It meant nothing now, was only a ruined marker of what Kitai had once been. To give this back for a princess? There were seeds in all of this, if one looked closely and thought about it, for what was coming. Not just in the larger sweep and tumble of time, but very specifically for the soldiers in the northwest who were to march doggedly through blowing, shifting sands north towards Erigaya, capital city of the Kislik, on the far side of the desert that lay west of the Golden River's bend. Those troops would carry orders to besiege and destroy Erigaya, and bring Kislik leaders in chains to Hanjin. They were to claim steppe wives and daughters to service and assuage the army, and be slaves, and so humble the barbarians of the northwest before the gathered and glorious might of Kitai and its emperor. They forgot something, though, heading north. They really did forget something. In a springtime before that northern march took place, a girl was walking beside her father amid chaos and excitement in a very crowded city. You could declare it madness, a collective fever, the way in which Yunling, second city of the empire, was transformed during the Peony Festival. Every spring, for the 2 weeks when the King of Flowers bloomed, it became nearly impossible to move along Yunling streets and lanes, or find a room at an inn. Houses great and small were filled with returning family and guests from out of town. People offered space, 3 or 4 to a bed, or a pallet on the floor, to strangers for considerable sums. A place to sleep for a delirious spring interlude before normal life resumed. There was nothing resembling normal life during the festival. Long Life Temple Road all the way down to the principal western gate, and both sides of Moon Dyke Road were crowded with hastily erected tents and pavilions selling peonies. Yao Yellows, affectionately called the Palace Lady, and Wei Reds cost thousands of cash for a single perfect blossom. Those were the most glorious graftings, the celebrated ones, and only the wealthiest could claim them. But there were less extravagant varieties. Tall purple and hidden stream scarlet, sash maroon, the 9-petal pearl, the exquisite tiny petals of the shuon. 90 different kinds of peony could be found in Yunling as the sun returned in spring, their blooming an occasion for joy, whatever else might be happening in the empire, on its borders, in the world. When the first blossoms appeared, a postal express began, racing east each morning along the reserved middle lane of the imperial road. There were 6 stations between Yunling and Hanjin. A fast relay of riders and horses could do it in a day and a night, carrying flowers, so that the Son of Heaven might share in the glorious splendor. Yunling had been celebrated for its peonies for more than 400 years, and the peony had been the imperial flower for longer than that. It was derided by ascetic philosophers, declared to be artificial. Peonies were grafted, constructed by man, not natural. It was disdained as gaudy and sensuous, too seductively feminine to justify exaltation, especially compared to the austere masculine bamboo or flowering plum. These views were known, but they didn't matter, not even at court. The peony obsession had become a supreme case of popular wisdom or madness, overriding the reflections of sages. Everyone who could came to Yunling at festival time. People walked the streets with flowers pinned to their hats. Aristocrats were carried in their chairs, and so were high-ranking members of the civil service in their long robes. Simple tradesmen crowded the lanes, and farmers pushed into the city to see the flowers and the entertainment. The more important gardens made a great deal of money for their owners, as peonies were sold outside their gates or along the streets. The Wei family, those artisans of the flower, charged 10 cash just to enter their walled garden and take the small boat across to the island in the pond where their best peonies were grown. The family hired guards. You were beaten if you touched a blossom. There was immense skill to the grafting of the flawless, redolent blossoms. People paid to walk along winding paths to see and smell the profligate profusion. They would line up for hours, then come back to see the changes from one day to the next. Even women were among them, bright blossoms in their hair. This was a time of year and a place, Yunling during the Peony Festival, when the increasing restrictions on women's movements were superseded, simply because they could not be enforced. It was springtime. There were loud, excited crowds, and the heady scent of extravagantly coloured blossoms. There was flute music, singing, dancers in the streets, jugglers, storytellers, men with trained animals. Wine and food were sold in booths, throngs given over to merriment, and to undeniably immoral behaviour in courtyards and lanes and bedchambers, not only in the pleasure district, as twilight descended each day. Another reason for philosophers to lament the folly and the flower. Walking beside her father, Shan is dizzy with excitement and trying not to show it. That would be undignified, childlike. She is concentrating on seeing everything, taking it in, registering details. Songs succeed or fail in the details, she believes. They are more than the pairing of words and music. It is the acuteness of observation that sets a work apart, makes it worth anything, really. She is 17 years old this spring, will be married by this same season next year. A distant thought still, mostly, but not a displeasing one. But right now she's in Yunling with her father, amid the morning crowds of the festival. Sight, sound, smell, flowers everywhere and a heavy crush of bodies, the glory and the assault, she thinks. She is hardly the only woman here, but she is aware of people looking at her as she and her father make their way back up Long Life Temple Road from the city wall. People had begun looking at her about 2 years ago. One would have to be in love or a poet to name her beautiful, but there seems to be something about the way she walks or stands, the way her gaze moves and then settles on objects or on people, that draws the attention of others back to her. She has wide-set eyes, a long nose, long fingers. She is tall for a woman. She gets the height from her father. Lin Kuo is an extremely long-limbed man, but so self-effacing he has stood with a slight stoop for as long as his daughter can remember, as if denying any proud assertion of height or endlessly ready to bow respectfully.